Donald Trump has tapped Brendan Carr, one of the actual authors of Project 2025, to head the FCC.
But to clarify for those that are watching, you aren't saying that no dollars have been spent as it relates to rural broadband dollars under the Infrastructure Act, correct?
To be clear, for the signature effort, $42
yes or
billion,
no? Have any dollars been spent?
not a
$1.
single person has been connected. That's
not my question, though. My question was, have any
issues? Senator Ted Cruz from
Okay,
Texas
I'm going to move on. I'm reclaiming my time at this point.
Many of these bills,
I'm reclaiming my time, which means, Chairman, I'm going to
per location.
Stop my time because the witness is not.
Are you asking him a question? Or are you?
No, I'm not asking him a question. I reclaim my time.
All right. Chair recognizes Ms. Crockett.
Okay, now I was at 41, y'all, so go back up.
We'll give you 9 more seconds.
Okay, thank you so much. Here's the deal. You've testified a lot about the problem with the broadband rollout being diversity, equity, and inclusion. You said DEI, I don't know how many times, which is one of the issues that Project 2025 takes issue with. But it's interesting to me because I have another article from the Texas Tribune, and it actually specifically states that internet providers say they are simultaneously hopeful and skeptical about whether the incoming federal dollars will be enough to connect the most underserved Texans. Historically, other federal rural broadband funding programs have seen limited success because many companies who committed to providing broadband went into default after radically underestimating their cost. It doesn't say anything about diversity. And the final thing that I will say is that this election, I didn't ask you a question. The final thing that I will say is that this election is the best example of why y'all are so afraid of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because then you can't have a simple-minded, underqualified white man somehow end up ascending. Instead, you've got to pay attention to the qualified black woman that is on the other side. And with that, I will yield.
I want to bring in Brendan Carr. He is a commissioner with the FCC. And we were talking about, you just happen to be in town here for work, but obviously your work deals a lot with First Amendment rights. That has been brought up so much, of course, in these protests. As you're watching all of this play out, what's the difference between, the First Amendment and what we are seeing happen here?
Yeah, thanks so much. First, I want to express my thanks and appreciation, obviously, to the NYPD that are doing some great work here to try to restore some law and order. One of the greatest things about this country is the First Amendment. People get to express their political opinions, as vile as they may be in some circumstances.
Trump wants to terrify anyone who challenges his dystopian vision of America, and honestly, Brendan Carr is the perfect stooge to do just that.
There's a lot the FCC can do. Broadcasters are differently situated than other speakers. They get free access to a valuable public resource, the airwaves, and they're licensed by the FCC. And the exchange for that is they have to serve the public interest. I think it's important that we take another look at that and we reinvigorate it. There's also a news distortion complaint at the FCC still having to do with CBS, and CBS has a transaction before the FCC. And I'm pretty confident that news distortion complaint over the CBS 60 Minutes transcript is something that's likely to arise in the context of the FCC's review of that transaction.
Normally, the FCC is all about deploying broadband across the country, making sure everyone has wireless access. That's been the focus of both Republican and Democratic chairs of the FCC for the 20 years that I've been reporting on this industry. But Brendan Carr is signaling this will not be business as usual. He is not talking about broadband in his tweets about his appointment. Instead, as you said, Jim, he is talking about the censorship cartel. He is pointing at big tech companies that are right now not under the regulatory purview of his agency. And he is saying that companies like Meta and Google need to be reined in.
And what he's doing is working.
Talk about something that happened over the weekend, not in your district, in Columbus. A group of neo-Nazis paraded through that city wearing, waving swastikas, covering their faces. This is not the first time this sort of thing has happened in Ohio in particular, and of course it's continuing to spread. We don't know what side of the aisle this comes from. I mean, typically neo-Nazis are for the far right. You had protests from the far left at your house.
Okay, so here's where we are. Over the past week, Joe and I have heard from so many people, from political leaders to regular citizens, deeply dismayed by several of President-elect Trump's cabinet selections, and they are scared. Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years. Joe and I realized it's time to do something different. And that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him.
What has gone on in totalitarian regimes before is what is happening in this country right now. It is fascism. His generals called him fascist. Joe Scarborough called him fascist. And now the fascist is in charge. And it is journalism's job to cover it that way, not to back off and say, okay, well, that's it, we lost. Let the fascism happen. No.
Donald Trump has spent years suing journalists and comedians who dared to make fun of him or speak out, and it seems like his efforts are honestly working. Money makes people do terrible things. We see it every day. And on the other hand, loyalty to Donald Trump can be incredibly lucrative, at least in the short term. But one upside to how brutally disappointing a variety of people have been, the liberal elites, the supposedly progressive pundits, the corporate Democrats, all of them, in the wake of the election, is that we now know who not to trust. We know who was never really with us in the first place, and we need to do everything possible to protect and support those with the actual integrity to keep up the fight. Thanks for watching our video. Did you know that you can support our show by becoming a subscriber? Just click the subscribe button and also ring the bell so that you get notifications when we're live or when we post new content.